Also appreciate the Honorable Speaker of our National Assembly, the Republic of South Africa, Honorable Togo Dijiza, our distinguished speakers from SADC National Parliament and the heads of delegations. Appreciate our Speaker of KwaZulu-Natal Legislature, Ms. Thembi, who's our host for the good symposium that we are holding. Honorable members of Parliament from SADC member states, Her Excellency SG of our SADC Parliamentary Forum, representative from our government departments, in particular, the Change and Air Quality Management from the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment, Mr. Moodley from Toyota Corporate South Africa, and Mr. Zigode, President of Amahlanga Wasemjondolo, our Agroecology Department and Directorate, Mr. Dala, and all the esteemed delegates and guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is my great honor to address this symposium of the 58th session of the SADC Parliamentary Forum, gathered under the theme that could not be more urgent, more relevant, timely, and more defining for our collective future. We meet at a time when our region is experiencing climate impact of unprecedented scale. Climate change is no longer a distant environmental concern, but it is a developmental crisis. It is a human settlement crisis. It is an infrastructure crisis. It is also a socio-economic and a governance crisis, and this is across the Southern African development community. It is increasingly becoming a human security crisis. Over the recent years, we have seen the storms that are becoming more violent, droughts that are more severe, floods that are very destructive, and heat waves that are deadly. We are gathered in the city of eThekwini, Durban, as you know it, which has seen communities repeatedly displaced, homes swept away, and the public infrastructure damaged as a result of the devastating effects of climate change. Honorable Speaker, not far from where we are gathered, in the past few days, the people of Umshwati local municipality were inordinately impacted and displaced by severe floods. We bear witness to how climate change is threatening development gains, how it's deepening the historical inequalities, but also undermining the right to adequate housing, which is a constitutional guarantee in South Africa, and an aspiration shared by all countries. As we have seen, the devastating climate events do not follow borders or boundaries. We have experienced here in eThekwini and along our eastern seaboard of South Africa that has also affected multiple countries simultaneously. In the same way that we have all affected no single country, therefore we can't address this challenge or challenges alone or similarly as countries. This gathering therefore comes at a time that is very critical but is also necessary in offering us an opportunity to establish a connected regional, national and local solutions to one of the biggest threats to our development. Within South Africa, we have adopted the Climate Change Risk and Vulnerability Plan, which has also created a vulnerability assessment, we call it RVA in short, and it confirms that most affected groups by climate disaster are rural communities who are already facing poverty and limited access to services. They are in peri-urban areas as well, and this results in informal settlement dwellers located in floodplains, in steep slopes, in wetlands, and in fire-prone areas. Women, youth, and children, as acting president has shown, bear the brunt of inadequate livelihoods exposure, and further socio-economic stress. Climate change is not gender neutral. It magnifies the structural inequalities that women and girls already face. Women are disproportionately exposed, disproportionately impacted, and disproportionately responsible for absorbing the climate shocks. In our communities, women carry the further burden of concern and caring for the sick when disaster strikes. It is women who also rebuild the household with fewer resources and less formal support. And yet women, despite being at the front lines of climate impact, remain at the margins of climate decision making. And I think we must all agree that this status quo must change. Equally, Program Director did indicate the negative impact that the young people growing up in a world shaped by climate uncertainty face. They inherit the consequences of decisions they did not make. But we also know that in our youth, we have the greatest asset of Africa and the greatest demographic asset. They are the most powerful drivers of innovation, resilience, and adaptation. Their creativity, energy, and digital influence make them essential partners in climate resilient communities. Honorable members, what does this mean for the critical role parliaments must play in shaping a climate resilient and a just transition for Southern Africa? It means that people most impacted by climate change must be able to be at the center and be allowed to be at the center of decision making that we as lawmakers drive. As we confront the escalating climate crisis, we're also called upon to realize the vision articulated in the African Union Agenda of 2063. The Africa we want, which was further defined. It must be prosperous, peaceful, united, a resilient continent built on an inclusive growth, sustainable development, and the empowerment of women and youth. The interlinked climate risks affecting our human settlements and our infrastructure broadly follow a chain of events. When the infrastructure fails, ecosystems collapse. When livelihoods decline, informal settlements expand. When governance is weak, communities are unable to adapt. And when the finance does not reach those who need it most, poverty and climate impacts reinforces one another. That is why climate change is not simply an environmental challenge. It is a systemic challenge, one that requires systemic solutions. In response to this, our climate change response strategy and implementation plan for human settlements guides us on how we need to build resilience between now and 2030. And I often say to my colleagues, we must no longer say 2030, we must just say in 4 years' time. Allow me to share the 3 pillars which we have adopted for a relevant and an entire SADC region, pillars for human settlement, as we have past met in Kenya under UN Habitat to develop our human settlement strategy. Settle people, that is pillar 1, in places and preserve the ecosystems that protect them. This will avoid communities being placed in flood-prone land, unstable slope wetlands, and coastal zones that are prone to storm surges and heat-stressed areas. And this is the first and the fundamental line of defense against climate hazard. It forces us to do our spatial planning correctly with the poor and the vulnerable in mind. Pillar 2 addresses the vulnerable settlements already that are in unsafe places. The reality is that we're not coming from a zero baseline. People are already living in hazardous locations. For these communities, we must, one, upgrade the informal settlement in Sutu where it's safe, and improve essential services such as water, sanitation, and electricity. We must also invest in the nature-based solutions on wetlands, urban greening, and vegetated buffers to protect the people who are already residing in these areas. As South Africa, we affirm that no community should remain invisible to policy simply because they are poor. And the last pillar, which is to establish a climate resilient infrastructure, norms, standards, and settlement typologies. Our infrastructure must withstand climate realities, and these shifts will reduce future losses, enhance livability, and create safer communities. We must all invest in innovative building technologies as human settlement infrastructure for the future must be reliable and resilient. This is a community-driven process. It must not exclude others. We must build a region where communities do not only receive climate information, but are allowed to shape it, where they do not only participate in planning, but they lead. And they do not only face climate risk, but also define and find solutions together. So disasters move across borders, so information must do that so. A regional integration report, approach, allows real-time data sharing, predictive modeling across the entire climate zones. This saves lives and can reduce damage. We need to play a central role in building the climate resilient SADC. In conclusion, Program Director, we need to ensure, as we respond to the question of how will we build a region that awaits for disaster to strike, or a region that acts before disaster becomes inevitable. The future we want, which I do believe is within our reach, is a future where cities and towns are resilient, safe, and inclusive, where ecosystems are protected and provide life-saving solutions, where women and youth lead the resilient initiatives. Infrastructure is strong, smart, and climate ready. How do we ensure we do that? Firstly, we can ensure that the land planning use legislation integrates climate risks. Secondly, we set the norms and standards for resilient infrastructure. Thirdly, we align human settlements and any other infrastructure laws with climate change's bill on our regional frameworks to allow us to exercise oversight. And the fourth point will be to ensure that expenditure on housing infrastructure and disaster risk management aligns with climate change. And lastly, we require early warning systems and municipal preparedness. At the outcome of this symposium, let us all embrace this moment not as a threat, but as an opportunity to reshape our communities. To reshape our communities which will allow them to live in dignity and not in danger. Parliament can be a champion for a just transition for all. Let me wish you well in the deliberations further of this symposium, and wish you well in your endeavors in building communities that are climate resilient and secure a future that our people deserve in their communities. Thank you very much.